Truth from Zagreb. My husband said, "It's your fault I had to hit you." I was Marija, a woman who once believed in perfect love, in promises written on the banks of the Sava. Under the Zagreb sun, my life was a canvas painted with pastel shades of dreams, and then Luka entered it like a thunderclap, bringing with him a storm that would nearly destroy me. I remember that day as clearly as if it were yesterday, his words which pierced my soul deeper than any blow. "It's your fault I had to hit you." It was a mantra, a poisonous melody that played in my mind over and over until I felt like I was indeed the one who had summoned that hell. But I wasn't. I was the victim, and he was the predator, wrapped in the false glow of apparent kindness. For years I lived in that cage, invisible to the outside world, but deadly to my soul. Today, as I stand here free and filled with quiet pride, I know that the truth has come to light. I know that justice, though slow, has finally reached those who tried to break me. I went through fire, through betrayal, through a planning that required all my courage. I confronted him with all the lies, and I came out strong. This is the story of how light found its way through the darkness, how I found my strength in the heart of Zagreb, and how, finally, I became the Marija I was meant to be. This is the truth. Our marriage began as a fairy tale. At least that's how it seemed to me. Luka was charming, attentive. He promised me the world. My parents adored him, and I felt like I had finally found my soulmate. We lived in a small, cozy apartment in the heart of Zagreb, with a view of the cathedral, and every morning it seemed like I was living a dream. But dreams are fragile. The first time he hit me, it was almost imperceptible. An argument about something banal, a forgotten coffee on the table, or unwashed dishes. His hand flew, hitting me across the face. I froze. I looked him in the eyes, expecting an apology, remorse, but instead, I saw only a cold, accusing gaze. "What did you expect?" he muttered, moving away. "For you not to listen to me, to do as you please." It was the beginning of a spiral descent into darkness, where every reaction of his was justified by my alleged mistake. After that, every time he raised his hand, his words became more convincing. "You made me do it. I had to teach you. If you weren't like that, this wouldn't have happened." Those sentences became chains on my soul, suffocating every ounce of my self-esteem. I became a shadow, eternally guilty, eternally afraid of making a mistake. I hid the bruises under long sleeves, avoided meetings with friends, even with my parents, so they wouldn't notice the change in me. Ivanka, my best friend since high school, started asking questions, but I would somehow distract her every time. I would tell her I was tired, that work was hard, that I wasn't feeling well. I was ashamed to admit the truth, ashamed and afraid. I was terribly ashamed. Every morning when I woke up, the first thing I would do was check his mood. My day depended on it. Would it be a sunny day, filled with his laughter, or a gloomy one, filled with his silence that was louder than any scream? I was afraid of loud noises, sudden movements, even his gaze. My heart would leap every time the apartment door opened. Would Luka be in a good mood? Would the evening pass in peace? Hope became a dangerous thing, because it would be broken every time. I remember one evening, I tried to make him his favorite sarma, hoping it would soften his heart. The kitchen smelled of sauerkraut and smoked meat, and I tried to make everything perfect, but he came home angry, threw the plate on the floor, saying the food was too salty, that I was incompetent, that I couldn't do anything right. I watched the pieces of porcelain scattered on the floor. As my heart sank, I didn't cry. Crying only irritated him more. Crying was a sign of my weakness, my disobedience. I just picked up the broken pieces, quietly, like a ghost. I wondered where that Marija full of life had gone, that Marija who laughed carefree, who dreamed big dreams. I had turned into a doll, controlled by someone else's will. And worst of all, I started to believe his word. I started to look for the fault in myself, to analyze my every word, my every move, looking for a reason for his violence. That was the most terrible abuse, the one that took place in the silence of my mind. Slowly but surely, I began to feel that I was losing my footing. His control was not limited to physical violence. It became all-encompassing. He controlled my finances, my schedule, even my clothes. He would say that you don't treat your husband like that. When I tried to express my own opinion, at first I attributed it to his jealousy, a sign of deep affection, but I soon realized it was a form of possession. Once when I asked him why he wouldn't let me go to the Konzum grocery store by myself, he said I was too slow at making decisions, and that he would do it faster and better. Every attempt of mine to regain even a fraction of my autonomy was suppressed, often accompanied by a new physical blow, or at least a painful verbal humiliation. My thoughts were constantly preoccupied with him. What does Luca think? What does Luca want? What should I do to make Luca happy? I knew in the depths of my soul that this was not love, it was slavery, hidden behind the facade of a marriage. But how to escape? How to find the strength when every ounce of your will has been taken away? Then Nina appeared. We knew each other from our student days, but we weren't close friends. She was Luca's colleague from work, and she started to accidentally stop by more and more often, under the pretext of bringing him some papers. At first I was grateful to her. She seemed like someone who understood the situation, who could listen to me. Luca would be kind and attentive in front of her. He would even joke at my expense, and Nina would laugh. I thought she was defending me, that she was trying to protect me from Luca's whims, but I soon noticed subtle things. Nina would always have some comment on my clothes, on my hairstyle, on how I had cleaned the apartment. Luca would laugh at that, and add something humiliating. What do you know, Marija? Nina has taste, or Nina would have done it better. Those words burned me. I felt like Luca and Nina were conspiring against me. Although I tried to rationalize it as my paranoia, I started to find them more often in whispered conversations, in the kitchen or on the balcony, which would stop when I appeared. I would see Nina's quick, almost guilty glance at Luca, and then they would both pretend that everything was fine. One evening, when Nina had left, and Luca was in the shower, I couldn't resist my curiosity. His cell phone was left on the table. I had never touched it. I knew it would provoke his anger, but this time, curiosity overcame fear. I went into his messages, my heart pounding like crazy, and there, hidden under another name, were messages from Nina. They were messages of love, messages that confirmed my worst suspicion, messages about secret dinners together, about plans for the future, about how they couldn't wait to get me out of the way. Luca and Nina had been in a secret relationship for months. It wasn't just a betrayal of the marriage, it was a betrayal of trust, of friendship, of everything I thought I had. Nina, the woman I had confided in, was part of it, and she was the one who was behind some of Luca's worst outbursts, egging him on against me. The realization of Luca and Nina's betrayal was like a powerful blow that knocked the wind out of me, but at the same time like a cold shower that woke me up from a long, painful dream. The bruises on my skin were visible, but the ones on my soul, caused by his words and Nina's fake smiles, were deeper. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, as his words, "It's your fault I had to hit you," refracted with the messages I had read. My fault? No, it wasn't my fault. They were to blame. I was a victim, and not just of Luca's violence, but also of Nina's insidious duplicity. That realization was bitter than any pill I had swallowed, but also stronger than any medicine. The pain turned into anger, and the anger into a cold, quiet determination. I will no longer be their victim. I will no longer live in fear. That was the moment when the flame of my will was rekindled, smoldering for a long time under the ashes of humiliation. The next day, I behaved as usual, but in my eyes, behind my submissive smile, there was a steely reflection. Luca noticed nothing. He continued with his usual behavior, and Nina continued to visit, pretending to be my friend. Every time she made a mean comment to me, I felt an urge inside to scream the truth in her face, but I held back. I knew that the moment for the truth had to be perfectly timed. My first thought was to contact a lawyer, but how? Luca controlled all the money, And I didn't have a kuna to my name. I didn't even have my own cell phone. The one I had was shared, and Luca often checked it. I needed a plan, a small imperceptible step, then another. I knew I couldn't rely on anyone until I was completely sure. The feeling of injustice that overwhelmed me was immense. I thought my family was destroyed, my trust was trampled, and my future was stolen. But at the same time, that injustice became my greatest motivation. I began to secretly collect evidence, every message of his, every clue, every little thing that could help me. I started to recall details, dates, words, going over in my mind every incident of violence, from the first blow to the last humiliation. I wrote them down in a small notebook that I hid under my pillow. I first realized that I needed money. I started selling some old things I had from before the marriage, which Luca showed no interest in, some small pieces of jewelry, old books, a few antiques I had inherited. I would go to the market in Zagreb, to Jakoševec, far from familiar places, and there I would sell things for small amounts. Collecting money that Luca would never notice was missing. Every kuna I earned was a small step towards freedom. Every time I sold something, I felt strong. It was as if I was rebuilding my little empire, brick by brick. My heart, once so fragile, began to grow stronger. I realized that I, and only I, was responsible for my destiny. No more guilt, no more shame, just determination. Day after day, week after week, I collected money and information. Every secret message, every hidden note, every piece of evidence of Luca and Nina's betrayal was carefully stored in a small jewelry box that I had hidden deep in the closet, under old blankets. Learning about inheritance law and succession became an obsession. Luca had an inheritance from his parents, an apartment and a significant amount of money, and although it was before our marriage, I knew that as his wife, I had certain rights under Croatian civil law. I wanted to know everything, every detail, every loophole in the law that I could use. I didn't just want to escape. I wanted justice. I wanted them to pay for every tear, for every bruise, for every humiliating word. One afternoon, while Luca was at work, I took the plunge, using the public internet at the nearby library, something Luca considered unnecessary, and would control me for. I searched for lawyers in Zagreb, who specialized in family law and domestic violence. I found a name, Ivanka Horvat. It wasn't my Ivanka, my friend, but the name sounded somehow comforting. Her website was clear, professional, and offered free initial consultations. I gathered all my courage, remembered all his blows, all of Nina's fake smiles, and scheduled a meeting via email from a fake address. It was the first time in a long time that I felt a glimmer of hope, but also immense fear. Would I succeed? Would Luca find out? Would I be broken again? The next day, under the pretext of visiting a sick aunt in another part of the city, I put on my most expensive dress, the one Luca had bought me and allowed me to wear, and went to the meeting. At the law office, Ivanka Horvat greeted me with a warm smile. She was a middle-aged woman, with a look full of compassion, but also firmness. As soon as I started talking, the words began to flow, all the suppressed pain, all the secrets I had kept. I cried, perhaps for the first time sincerely in years, as I told her about Luca's violence, about Nina's betrayal, about the financial control. Ivanka listened carefully, taking note of every word. "Marija," she said quietly when I had finished, "what you have been through is terrible, but you are not alone. We have every basis for initiating divorce proceedings and protection from violence. Under Croatian law, you have the right to a share of the property acquired during the marriage, and even to a part of his inheritance under certain conditions, especially with evidence of abuse." I felt as if a mountain of ice was melting in my heart. Ivanka explained the whole process to me, step by step. She emphasized the importance of collecting as much evidence as possible, photos of bruises, messages, emails, witness statements, everything I was already doing. I was on the right track. Her voice was calm and authoritative, giving me a sense of security that I hadn't felt in years. She told me we had to be strategic, that we couldn't give Luca any reason to suspect anything. You have to act as normally as possible, until we are ready, she advised. The plan began to take clear shape. I decided to target Luca's laptop, which he often left open. I knew there had to be more evidence on it. Now, with professional guidance, I felt less alone in the fight that was just beginning. Every day after visiting the lawyer, Ivanka was filled with a strange mixture of fear and excitement. I had to be careful not to show Luca any signs of change. This meant continuing to play the role of the submissive wife, listening to his accusations, enduring his outbursts, all until I had enough evidence and a safe escape plan. It was agonizing. Every touch of his, every look was a reminder of his betrayal, of Nina's duplicity. Inside, I was burning with the desire to scream the truth in his face, to expose him, but I knew I had to be patient. Strategy was key. The biggest risk was accessing his laptop. He would often leave it open in the bedroom, but would return at unexpected moments. I needed an opportunity when he would be gone long enough for me to search his files, especially those related to finances and communication with Nina. I waited for weeks, patiently, until the perfect opportunity presented itself. Luca announced that he was going on a longer business trip to Split. This was my window. A few days before his departure, I began to prepare. I bought a small USB stick, hidden in my coat pocket, and learned how to quickly copy files. I practiced opening his hidden folders, knowing that he probably used some tricks to hide sensitive information. My nervousness was palpable, but at the same time, the adrenaline pushed me forward. The day of his departure was tense. He hugged me at the door, telling me to be good, and to wait for him. His words burned me, but I smiled and nodded. As soon as the door closed, I felt my heart race. No more pretending, Marija. Now it's time for action. I went into the bedroom. The laptop was on the table. My hands trembled as I opened it. I knew his password. It was his favorite football team. Everything was there. Hidden folders, with documents about his bank accounts, investments, real estate, documents he had hidden from me for years, claiming he was bad with money, and that I should worry about other things. And then, a folder called Project. Inside, a sea of photos of Luca and Nina's trip together, their dinners together, and even messages they had exchanged, planning a life without me. It wasn't just about copying documents, it was about discovering the extent of his betrayal. Every photo, every message, was a new sting, but at the same time, a new strength. I felt nauseous, but I suppressed it. I have to do this. I copied everything. I was counting on the fact that Luca, although meticulous, would not check every detail. Immediately upon his return, when I was done, I put the USB stick back in my pocket, and deleted the search history, and all traces. I felt exhausted, but victorious. I had the evidence, I had the weapon, and I had Ivanka, the lawyer, who was waiting for me. Now it was their turn to pay. After Luca returned from his trip, I acted as if nothing had happened. His arrogance and control were unchanged, and I pretended to tolerate them, while secretly building my wall of determination. A few days after his return, Luca mentioned that he was planning a weekend trip, just for the two of us, to up a TJ. He said it with that fake smile, full of apparent love, and an attempt to re-establish control. "You've been behaving so well lately, Marija," he said. "You deserve a break." I knew it was just a trick, an attempt to keep me in a golden cage, but I had another plan. I suggested that before the trip, as a little outing, we go for a drink with Nina and her boyfriend, a made-up story Luca used to hide their relationship. I wanted to confront Nina one more time, one last time under the guise of friendship, before the truth exploded. He agreed, unaware of what I had in store for him. We met at a cafe in the center of Zagreb, near Mandashovac. My heart was beating like crazy. Luca was relaxed. Nina was smiling. The usual conversation, about work, about mutual acquaintances, began. I felt like I was playing a role in some sick play. During the conversation, Nina, as always, tried to throw a little poisonous dart. "Marija, are you sure this hairstyle suits you? You look kind of tired. Maybe you need something that will lift you up more." Luca laughed, and I felt the blood rush to my veins. That's when I decided, there was no perfect moment, but this one was good enough. "Nina," I began,
my voice surprisingly calm. Thank you for your concern. You know, I've been feeling tired and exhausted for a long time, but now, since I know the truth, I feel incredibly refreshed. Nina stopped biting her lip, her smile froze. She looked at Luca, who also sensed the change in the air. The truth? What are you talking about, Marija? Nina asked, her voice full of false confusion. I'm talking about you and Luca, about your little secret, about the messages, the photos, the trips to Split. I took out my cell phone, a new one I had bought and hidden, and on it I had copies of the worst message. I slowly pushed it across the table, so they could both see it. Luca's eyes went wild. Nina turned pale, her lips tightening. Marija, what are you doing? Luca shouted, his eyes threatening. Do you know what's waiting for you? His hand went up, but this time, I wasn't scared. I looked him straight in the eyes. No, Luca, I said, my voice sounding stronger than ever. I'm the one who knows what's waiting for you. And you, Nina. Then I turned to Nina. Friends? I thought we were. But you're worse than him. You used my pain, my weakness. That's so pathetic. The other people in the cafe started to watch us. Luca was beside himself. That's not how you treat your husband, he yelled, drawing even more attention. You're embarrassing me. It's your fault this is happening. You're always to blame. And I answered, clearly and loudly, no, Luke, you are to blame, and your fake love, and your betrayal, and your hands that hit me. But all of that is over. Lawyer Ivanka Horvat will explain everything to you. I grabbed my bag and left the cafe, leaving them to sit in shock and shame. My heart was still pounding wildly, but this time, it was from excitement, from the feeling of victory. Freedom smelled sweet.
After that outburst at the cafe, I felt like I had cut the rope that had held me captive for years. Liberating, but also terrifying. I knew Luca wouldn't stay calm. His pride was hurt, and his anger had surely consumed him. I didn't go back to our apartment. Instead, I went to Ivanka, my lawyer. I told her in detail everything that had happened, showing her the messages and documents I had collected from Luca's laptop. Her face was serious, but in her eyes I saw satisfaction. Marija, she said, this is perfect. We have everything we need. Now it's time for official steps. The next morning, Ivanka filed for divorce, along with a request for a restraining order and a temporary ban on access. We included all the evidence, including medical records of old injuries that I had managed to document, testimonies from neighbors who knew about Luca's temper, and of course, everything I had found on his laptop. In the request for the division of property, Ivanka clearly highlighted my rights to a part of his property, including a part of the inheritance, given the years of marriage and the evidence of violence and financial control. The case was strong. Luca was taken aback. When the papers were served, he allegedly went crazy. He called me hundreds of times, sent me threatening messages, tried to show up at my parents' address, where I had temporarily taken refuge, but Ivanka had already taken steps. The police were informed of the restraining order, and every attempt he made to approach me was documented. This only strengthened my case. Nina was also under pressure. Their affair, which was a secret to everyone but a few of them, was now public. Luca's colleagues, friends, even his family, everyone found out the truth. Luca tried to deny it, to turn the story around, to claim that I was unstable, that I was making things up, but the evidence was too clear. Ivanka made sure that the story wasn't just about his betrayal, but also about the systematic violence and abuse. My lawyer was ruthless, but fair. I knew that Luca had hired his own lawyer, an old family friend, who tried everything to minimize the damage, but Ivanka was one step ahead. Every time Luca's lawyer tried to discredit me or my evidence, Ivanka would present new, even stronger evidence. The court process was exhausting. Every hearing was like opening old wounds. I had to go through the pain again, through the memories of every blow, every humiliating word. But this time, I wasn't alone. Ivanka stood by me, strong and determined. My Ivanka, my childhood friend, also provided support, coming to every hearing, holding my hand when I broke down. A feeling of pride and quiet strength began to emerge. As I looked at Luca's face, he, who had been so powerful and controlling in our home, now sat in the courtroom, pale and bewildered. His lawyer tried to reduce things to a marital squabble, trying to discredit my testimony. "Mrs. Marija, weren't you the one who often provoked Mr. Luca with your behavior?" Luca's lawyer asked, trying to provoke me. But I was ready. "No," I answered calmly. "I only provoked him by existing. Violence is never justified, Mr. Lawyer. No matter what someone provokes." Luca's colleagues were also present in the courtroom. Some sympathized with him. Others pitied me. Nina was there too, sitting behind Luca's lawyer, her face wrinkled with worry. Her eyes avoided mine. Luca's statements, full of lies and attempts to shift the blame to me, only dug him in deep. "My Marija has always been emotionally unstable," he told the judge. "She often cried for no reason, exaggerated things. A blow? It was just a warning. It's your fault I had to hit you. She drove me to it." Hearing those words again, I felt my heart clench. But this time, there was no pain, only emptiness, and a quiet chill. In that moment, the last piece of feeling I ever had for him broke. His false facade crumbled, revealing the man he really was, weak, full of anger, and unable to take responsibility. Ivanka then presented the photos of the bruises, the medical reports, the testimony of a neighbor about the arguments, and even messages from Luca's mother, who had begged me to be patient with him, implying that she too was aware of his nature. She also produced a printout of the messages between Luca and Nina, presenting them in detail to the court. The whole courtroom was whispering. Nina shrank in her chair. The charge of domestic violence was clear. The evidence was too strong. The judge ruled in my favor. Luca was found guilty of domestic violence, and the marriage was dissolved. He not only lost part of his property, including a part of the inheritance he so cherished, but he was also ordered to pay a fine and attend mandatory anger management counseling. As for Nina, although she was not directly prosecuted for adultery, her role in their relationship, combined with Luca's public shaming, destroyed her reputation. She lost her job and became the subject of gossip in Zagreb. Justice, though perhaps not what I expected in a dream, had found its way. I felt exhausted, but also immensely relieved. The burden I had carried for years had finally fallen. The legal battle was over, but the battle for my soul was just beginning. I had the verdict. I had a sense of vindication, but the wounds were deep. The pain I had felt for years did not disappear overnight. I would often wake up in a sweat, distraught, still expecting his hand, his word, but slowly, day by day, I began to recover. The support of my family and Ivanka was crucial. My parents, who were in shock when they learned the real truth about Luca's violence, were by my side every step of the way. My mother cooked my favorite pasta cotta every day, and my father would tell me jokes, trying to make me laugh. "I raised you to be strong, Marija," my mother would often tell me, "and never forget who you are." Those words had a deeper meaning than ever before. Ivanka, my friend, was my rock. She listened to me without judgment, comforted me, reminded me of the strength I had shown. She helped me find a therapist, a woman who specialized in trauma from domestic violence. In therapy, I learned to recognize the patterns of abuse, how to resist the feeling of guilt that Luca had instilled in me, and how to rebuild my self-confidence. I talked about the pain, the fear, the shame, everything I had hidden for years. Every word spoken was a step towards healing. I started to get back into my old hobbies, painting, and I discovered the beauties of Zagreb in a new way, walking the streets of the upper town, visiting the Museum of Broken Relationships, laughing with friends in the parks. Every walk was like a meditation. Every brushstroke on the canvas was an expression of my newfound freedom. I realized that recovery is a journey, not a destination. There were days when I felt broken, when I doubted myself, but those days became rarer. I thought of Luca. I heard that he was left alone, that Nina had left, unable to bear the shame and his unstoppable anger. His career suffered, and his reputation was irreparably damaged. He had money, but he had no one. He didn't have himself. I felt a strange mixture of sadness and indifference. I wasn't happy about his downfall, but I didn't feel sorry for him either. I realized that he was a victim of his own toxicity, trapped in a cycle of anger and manipulation. I got out. It was as if I had been born again. The Marija who survived. The Marija who became stronger. The Marija who could finally breathe with full lungs. Back in her Zagreb. Years have passed since that day in the courtroom. The scars have remained, but they have faded, become part of the story, no longer a source of pain. Now they are a reminder of the strength I found within I live in my small apartment in Zagreb, near the Dolak market, where I buy fresh groceries every morning, enjoying the small joys of life. I have returned to painting with full passion, and my paintings, once dark and melancholic, are now full of bright colors and hope. I have exhibited some of my works in a small gallery in the upper town, and the sales are going surprisingly well. Ivanka, my lawyer, has become a dear friend. We often go for coffee, talk about everything, from work to our personal life. She was a witness to my transformation, from a frightened woman to one who took control of her own life. My lawyer helped me not only legally, but also emotionally. I will never forget her support. I have no contact with Luke. I heard that he lives a withdrawn life, that he has lost most of his friends. Nina moved out of Zagreb, went abroad, trying to escape the shame. Their fate is an indicator of poetic justice, the inevitable consequence of their actions. I didn't feel triumph, only peace. The peace that comes with the feeling that justice has been served, that the truth has come to light. The greatest victory was not in defeating him, but in finding myself again. I found the Marija who believed in herself, who was not afraid to be herself. No more guilt, no more fear, just me, strong and independent. Every time I remember his words, "It's your fault I had to hit you," they no longer sound like an accusation to me. They sound like a warning, like a reminder of the dark past from which I escaped. I am grateful for every step of that difficult journey, because it brought me here, to this feeling of quiet power, to the realization that I am the master of my destiny. My story is not just a story of survival, it is a story of rebirth, of the courage that lies hidden in every woman, of the strength to stand up and say, "Enough is enough." This is the truth from Zagreb, the truth that set me free. My transformation was not only emotional and mental, but it was also reflected in my daily life, in the way I moved through the world. I no longer walked with my head down, avoiding gazes. Now I walked upright, with a smile on my face, ready to face whatever life brought me. I redecorated the apartment, threw out all the things that reminded me of Luca, and filled it with light and colors. I bought myself a small dog, named her Nada, which symbolized my newfound belief in a better future. Nada became my faithful companion on long walks in Maximir Park, where I found peace and inspiration. The feeling of injustice that once suffocated me was now replaced by a feeling of deep gratitude. Gratitude for the opportunity to live authentically, for the support I received, for the strength I discovered. I became active in the community. I volunteered at a shelter for women victims of violence, sharing my story with those who were going through similar struggle. I wanted to show them that there is a way out, that they are not alone, that they can get out of that hell. Every woman I helped was a small part of my own poetic justice, paying back the universe. I also met with other victims, listened to their stories, shared my experiences, offered a helping hand. Through these conversations, I realized that my story is universal, that violence knows no borders or language, but also the strength of the human spirit, the ability to survive and recover, is universal. I would often find myself thinking about Luca, but not with anger or bitterness, but with a kind of sad empathy. His inability to control his anger, to take responsibility, ultimately destroyed him. His life, once filled with ambitions and social status, was now empty and lonely. Nina, on the other hand, tried to erase everything from her life, but the consequences caught up with her. Something told me that she would never find true peace. That was their punishment, worse than any court verdict.
living with their own decisions and their devastating consequences. My power now came, not from control or fear, but from authenticity and self-confidence. Their words, "It's your fault I had to hit you," are now just a memory of who I was, not who I am. Every day was a new beginning. The morning sun in Zagreb, the smell of coffee from the nearby cafe, the murmur of people on the street. These were all small reminders of the beauty of life that I had rediscovered. No more inner monologue that revolved around guilt and shame. Now my thoughts were focused on growth, on learning, on creating. On one occasion, Ivanka, my lawyer, invited me to dinner. We talked about life, about my paintings, about her new cases. At one point she looked at me across the table, with sincere admiration. "Marija," she said, "do you remember that frightened woman who walked into my office? I hardly recognize you. Your transformation is incredible." I smiled. "Yes, I remember," I said, "but that's still me. I just found my voice, and you helped me a lot with that." I knew the road had been difficult, but every step had built me up. I learned that letting go is key, that I can't carry the burden of the past forever. I forgave myself for having endured for so long, for having believed in lies. That was the hardest forgiveness. Luca and Nina were the past, a lesson learned, a signpost for the future. I felt no need to take revenge on them. My happiness and my peace were the best revenge. I had a new life, filled with meaning and purpose. I never allowed fear to trap me again. I learned to trust my instincts, to set boundaries, and to protect my heart. My quiet power lay in resilience, in the ability to get up after every fall, to find light in the darkest moments. Life was unpredictable, but I was ready. I knew I was strong. I knew I had survived, and I knew I was free. And that was the most beautiful truth of all, a truth that radiated from every corner of my new life, in the heart of Zagreb. My story is a story of rebirth, but also a warning. Violence hides behind closed doors, in whispers, in lies. My hope is that my story can be a beacon for someone else who feels trapped, because the truth, it always finds its way.